where the river meets the stars. In a quiet riverside town nestled beneath rolling hills and a sky that shimmered with stars at night, lived a girl named Alara. She worked as a librarian, a keeper of forgotten stories, a dreamer who often lingered too long at the poetry section. Her days were filled with the scent of old pages and the warmth of sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. But her heart, though full of wonder, carried an emptiness she couldn't quite name. Across town, there was a boy named Aiden. He was a boat builder, the last of his family to carry on the craft. His workshop sat by the river, where wood met water, and his hands were always stained with varnish and dreams. Aiden loved silence, the rhythm of waves, and the quiet hope that someday, someone would truly understand him. Their paths crossed for the first time in late autumn. Alara had wandered from her usual walking trail and found herself on the edge of the river, where the golden leaves floated like forgotten letters. She sat on a bench, watching a lone boat tied to the dock. Aiden, emerging from his workshop, noticed her presence but said nothing. Their eyes met briefly, just enough to light a spark neither of them understood. Days passed. She returned. So did he. No words were exchanged at first, just glances, half-smiles, shared sunsets. Until one rainy afternoon, Alara finally broke the silence. "Do you ever name your boats?" she asked, her umbrella trembling in the wind. Aiden looked at her and nodded. "Every single one. They deserve a story before they meet the river." And just like that, their own story began. They met more often, sometimes at the dock, other times at the library. He'd bring her carved bookmarks shaped like stars, she'd gift him poems tucked between the pages of old books. Slowly, their worlds began to entwine. She taught him about metaphors, he showed her how to sand wood until it felt like silk. The river became their sacred place. One winter evening, as snow began to fall, Aiden took Alara out on a boat he had secretly built just for her. Its name was carved on the side in delicate cursive, Starlight. "I built this with you in every line, every curve," he confessed, his voice trembling with the wind. "Because loving you feels like setting sail into the stars." Tears welled in Alara's eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming truth of being truly seen. She kissed him. And in that kiss, the river disappeared, the world stilled, and only the stars bore witness to their beginning. But life, as it often does, tested them. Alara was offered a scholarship in another city, her dream, to become a writer, to tell stories beyond the library walls. Aiden, tied to the river, to the legacy of his craft, couldn't leave. They stood once more at the dock, unsure of the future. "Can we survive distance?" she asked. Aiden gently took her hand. "The river will always lead you back to me. And I'll be waiting, where the river meets the stars." Years passed. Letters were exchanged, boats were built, stories were written. They grew, apart but always together in spirit. And one spring morning, Alara returned, not just with books or dreams, but with a heart still anchored to the boy by the river. Aiden was still there, older, wiser, and still waiting. She ran to him. And this time, they didn't let go. Some love stories don't need a dramatic ending. Just a river. A few stars. And two hearts that always found their way home. The light between oceans. The sea had always been a part of Evelyn's life. Her father was the lighthouse keeper on the remote island of Narrow Bay, where the waves spoke in ancient tongues and the stars seemed closer than anywhere else on Earth. Evelyn grew up learning how to read the tides and chase the wind, but she never expected love to find her in such a lonely place. It was the summer of 1952 when James arrived. He was a quiet man, carrying only a suitcase and a letter of recommendation from the mainland. A former Navy officer, James had taken a job assisting Evelyn's aging father at the lighthouse. At first, Evelyn thought he was distant, his eyes always seemed lost at sea. But there was something about the way he stood at the edge of the cliff, listening to the waves, that made her wonder what story he carried behind his silence. They spent their days working side by side. James would clean the lens, haul oil cans up the stairs, and check the foghorn. Evelyn handled the radio and kept the logbook. In the evenings, they'd share meals, and little by little, he began to speak about his time in the war, the brothers he'd lost, and the dreams he had once had of becoming a writer. One night, as a storm raged outside, Evelyn found James sitting in the lantern room, staring out at the black ocean. "Do you believe," he asked quietly, "that some places carry memories? That the sea remembers the people it has taken?" Evelyn nodded. "And maybe it keeps their hearts, too." He turned to her with a softness she hadn't seen before. "I think it gave mine back." From that night on, something changed. They walked together at dawn and danced barefoot in the rain. James read to her by candlelight, and Evelyn taught him how to chart the stars. For the first time in years, James began to write again, poems about waves, letters he never sent, and a story about a girl who lived in a lighthouse and the man who found his way back to life through her. As autumn approached, Evelyn's father fell ill. The cold set into his bones, and by November, he passed away peacefully, his last breath taken beneath the light he had tended for decades. James held Evelyn through the nights that followed, and in his arms, she found the comfort of something lasting. Winter on Marrow Bay was harsh, but the warmth between them never faded. When spring came, James asked her to marry him beneath the lighthouse beam. He carved their names into the stone wall, just above the cliff where he had first watched the sea. Years passed. They had 2 children, who grew up with salt in their hair and love in their hearts. James published a book, The Light Between Oceans, and it was dedicated to Evelyn, who gave me back the part of me I thought the sea had taken. Even in old age, they remained on the island. Evelyn lit the lamp each evening, and James read to her as the wind howled outside. They often sat in silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because their hearts had already said it all. And when James passed away one summer morning, the sea was calm, as if paying tribute to a man it had once held and then returned. Evelyn kept the light going for the rest of her days. And on the day she joined him, their children lit the lighthouse one last time, watching as its golden beam reached across the waves, just as their love once had, from one heart to another, like a light between oceans.